Hello everyone and welcome back to another Fam 2 Cents cooking video, and today we are making buffalo chicken lasagna. Now just jumping right into things, the first thing we need to do is cut up our chicken. Now there are various ways that you can go about making your chicken for buffalo chicken lasagna. Whatever you feel is more convenient, whatever you feel is the quickest for you or the most accessible. You can bake them whole and then chop them up afterwards. You can cut them into strips and then bake them and then chop them up. You can dice them up as I'm doing right now and then do it. You can broil them. You can pan fry them. However you want to do it. It's completely up to you. At this point, doing it the way that I did it was the most convenient because I'm going to be using only the Ninja Foodie, and I have no pans that are big enough to cook multiple chicken breasts at one time and do it in a timely manner. So this was kind of the most efficient way for me to do it. So I am dicing up the chicken and I'm going to season it. I found this method also helps making sure the chicken is evenly seasoned throughout, as opposed to just seasoning the outside, cooking the whole thing, and then cutting it up. You get a lot more flavor this way. So it's a bit more work, but this is the way that I decided to do it because it just worked for me. But cook your chicken or prep your chicken however you would like to do it, and then you're still gonna cut it up at the end of the day anyway. Like that's still gonna happen. So the next order of business, obviously after you've chopped up your chicken, is to get it seasoned. We're using the usuals here: onion powder, garlic powder, cayenne pepper, regular pepper, and salt. Keeping it very simple here. I didn't use garlic salt this time because I'm using just actual regular salt. And also I poured some Frank's Red Hot sauce directly on the chicken while it was raw, just to kind of add a little more flavor to it. Plus, it's going to help make the base for the actual buffalo sauce. You guys will see what I mean in a moment. Moving right along here, nothing too fancy when it comes to how you're going to cook these. Toss some butter in there, allow that butter to melt, and you're just going to toss the chicken in a little at a time. You don't want to overfill it because you want to give all the chicken a chance to cook properly. As you can see here, I had some leftover chicken that I wasn't initially going to use, but I said screw it. So while I'm waiting for the butter to melt and everything like that, I am cutting up the remainder of this chicken. And don't worry, I'm tossing it in there with the already seasoned chicken, but I'm gonna re-season just to make sure it is evenly distributed. So pretty straightforward here. Like I said, you're gonna get your butter melted, and once you do that, go ahead and toss your diced chicken in there. Once your chicken is pretty much cooked through, you don't really want to overdo it here because it's going to be baking and everything too. You want to go ahead and take that out and put that into a separate container, so that way you know, it has somewhere to be while you're cooking the rest of it, because you're going to have to do several batches here, unless for whatever reason you have a pot big enough to cook all this at once, which I doubt anybody does. You're going to be doing some batches, so have a container to the side set for you to put your cooked chicken when it's done. So now we're going to do the cheese mixture. Obviously you need ricotta cheese, and I added a whole bunch of well, some other cheeses to the mixture here. So go ahead and get your ricotta into the into your bowl or container or wherever you're putting it. One thing I'd like to add or note is in my experience, it's a lot easier to spread this because this mixture can get pretty thick. Once you have the ricotta cheese and you put in shredded cheese and all that good stuff, it'll make a very, very thick mixture. And in my experience, it's very tough to really spread that over the noodles. Rather you have already ready noodles, like go straight in the oven, or you have cooked noodles. It can be a pain in the butt just to spread it over them because they move around and they fold up and you get all kinds of issues. So what I've decided to do is add a little bit of water into it to loosen it up a bit. I prefer my cheese mixture to be a lot thinner, just to make distribution less of a headache. So on top of the ricotta cheese, obviously I've added mozzarella, some Parmesan and Romano mixture, and then I also added a 6-cheese Italian mix to it. There's a lot of cheese in here, guys, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. Now afterwards, you can go ahead and start getting your noodles prepped, unless you have oven-ready noodles, which are kind of nice. The ones that are already ready for the oven, like you just put them in there and they're fine, hardened. You don't have to boil them, but if you do have to boil them, now's a good time to do so. After they're done, you drain them and set them to the side in a pan of water. So as you guys can see, we have the base here for our sauce, and I'm gonna do some slightly unconventional things in order to kind of expand this, because we're gonna need quite a bit of it, and obviously as you can see there's not very much in there. I didn't buy like a huge bottle of hot sauce or anything like that, so we're gonna have to kind of artificially expand this. So what I did is I added chicken broth to it, and I put an entire stick of butter in there, and a little bit later on what you'll see me do is take a mixture of water and cornstarch in order to thicken it up as it starts to cook through. So as time goes on and everything starts to mix in, you see I threw the bouillon in there. That was the chicken broth that I was telling you about. When I added the water, I tossed a bouillon cube in there to not take away from the flavor. Also, because I've added all this extra stuff and the hot sauce is kind of thinned down, I wanted to kind of re-season it, so you'll see me toss some more seasonings in there too. This will help make a really good sauce. Now typically you'll really only see the cornstarch and water mixture used in a lot of Asian dishes to thicken up their sauces. I thought I would implement that here, because I mean you don't want a thin buffalo sauce when you're putting that on your anything buffalo, to be honest. So this is a good way to thicken it up a little bit and get it back to the consistency it once was when it was hot sauce before we added all this extra stuff, but still giving a nice flavor. So as you can see here, I'm doing a little test with the spoon to see if it has thickened back up to my liking, and it has. And that's really good. As I said, this is a really good method to get it back thick if it's thinned out for you. I used to use flour, but flour just doesn't work as well as the cornstarch does for me. So as you can see here, what we're going to do is we're going to take this chicken and redistribute it back into the buffalo sauce here. Be careful if you have a lot like I do, because this is a lot. By the way, this buffalo chicken lasagna I made is huge. I didn't make a small one. I know it's just me and Squishy, but she really likes it and she likes to take it to work. So we'll put a whole bunch to the side and some storage containers for her so she can take to work, and I can have something to eat throughout the week. So this is a good large meal to make that you can eat over a nice amount of time if you're making sure that you're properly storing it. But we're gonna redistribute some of this chicken back in here. What that's gonna do is all the seasonings and stuff that was on the chicken when it was cooking and everything is getting redistributed back into the sauce here. And the reason why I wanted to really thicken it back up is because once I put this chicken in there and some of those juices go back in there, it's gonna thin back out just a little bit. So once you get that chicken back on there, you can pretty much put it on like low heat or something like that, whatever. If you have it in a pot and not the Ninja Foodi or whatever, just put it on really low heat and allow it to just like slowly simmer while you're getting everything else together to start prepping your lasagna. And at this point, you're pretty much ready to start assembling. So assembling your lasagna is pretty straightforward. As you can see, I have 2 paper towels or napkins or whatever you want to call them in the middle here to dry off the noodles. The noodles are kind of sitting in water for the time being because I wanted them to stop cooking, and I also wanted them to stay straight, because they tend to get all weird and they dry up and stuff if you don't have them at least in some kind of moisture. So I didn't keep them in there too long so they didn't get all soggy or weird or anything like that. But you want to start with a little layer, just a little bit of chicken in the sauce on the bottom before you put anything else on there. Just a little bit of chicken on the bottom, and then you're gonna line these up. Usually, if you're using the lasagna pan, you'll get about 4 across. So a little bit of chicken with the sauce on the bottom, the noodles, and then you're gonna start with the cheese next. And then after you do the cheese, it's gonna be the chicken again, and then the noodles, and then the cheese. And that's the order that you're kind of going to go in. Now, on the first bottom, like 2 layers or whatever, I don't add any extra shredded cheese to it. I wait until I get to the last 2 layers over the top. There's no particular reason for this outside of the fact that I kind of just ran out of cheese. Like, I didn't have a whole lot left. So if you have a whole lot of cheese on hand, you'll be fine. But as you can see here, you see how that sauce is kind of distributing itself along the base of like the cheese, or the top of the cheese or whatever. That's why I wanted to thicken it up just a little bit so it wasn't super watery. It's distributing exactly how I want it to do. So once again, a little layer of chicken on the bottom before you put the noodles on top of them, because you don't want the noodles to stick or burn on the bottom there, so that's kind of a buffer. And then once you do that, you add the cheese, and then you add the chicken, and then it's noodles, cheese, and then the chicken. And you're gonna keep doing that. As I said before, if you want to add some extra cheese on top of the cheese mixture, you can do that too, but you know, that depending on who we're talking about, that could be overkill, so that is completely up to you. And like I said, it's pretty straightforward from there. Just make sure your distribution is nice and even, or at least as even as you can get it. And if your sauce is the right consistency, it'll just kind of spread itself along the lasagna, so you'll be in good shape without having to do really too much. And it just pretty straightforward from there. You keep assembling it. You don't want to build it too high, so make sure you have a nice tall pan, because if it's too high, what's going to happen is when it starts cooking, it's going to bubble over, and that is a bad time. You do not want a bubbling over lasagna in your oven. It is a really bad time, so be very, very careful. Same thing with the mac and cheese. If you guys saw my mac and cheese video, do not overflow it, especially if you're using the milk base, the milk and egg base. It'll overflow and it will not be a good thing for you. So as you can see here on this particular layer, I started to add some extra cheese on top of it there, because I actually had enough for the upper layers just to get some extra cheese in there. Totally not necessary, but you can do it if you like. So we're getting to the home stretch here. It's about time to add the last layer of cheese, and then we're going to cover this thing up with foil and toss it in the oven. I didn't show you the process, the cooking process, when it comes to tossing it in the oven and all that stuff, because I forgot to record that portion, but fairly simple. 400 degrees. You got to put it in there for about an hour and 30 minutes. It doesn't need to cook that long, to be honest, because everything in here is pretty much cooked already. You're just kind of getting everything acquainted. I guess that's the best word I can use there. And we're gonna put the foil on there. The first hour, you're gonna leave it covered in the oven, top shelf, 400 degrees. After that first hour, that last 30 minutes, you're gonna take the top off and allow it to bake as is with the top off, and that'll give it that nice, wonderful color on the top of it. All the ingredients would have been melded by then, and then you'll be good to go. And if all goes well, you should be met with this beautiful specimen. As you can see, this thing is cooked to perfection. I like mine's just a little burnt on the ends. Like I said, you don't really need to cook it for a whole hour and 30 minutes. In most cases, you really don't. But I like mine to be, I like the browning. It adds a whole lot of flavor to it. This is buffalo chicken lasagna, guys. The next photo that's going to come up is going to give you a picture of it sliced. And it's amazing. A wonderful recipe that you should absolutely try. Let me know what you think about it if you do.